Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey, I think, into a country many might know by name, but maybe not its deep history or complex present.
You're talking about Niger.
Exactly, Niger. And our mission, for this deep dive is to unpack a whole stack of sources. We've got historical accounts, economic analyses, social studies, right, to give you a shortcut, basically, to understanding this key West African nation. We'll pull out the most important bits from ancient empires right up to today's challenges.
And what's really striking looking at the material is how some sources from, say, 2002 called Niger an untapped gold mine, full of emerging opportunity.
Yeah, I saw that. Potential.
But then the same sources and others paint this consistent picture of a nation just grappling with really persistent, deep-seated issues.
That tension.
Exactly. That paradox between the potential and the reality. That's something we really need to explore today.
Okay, so we've got material covering, well, pretty much everything. The geography, the earliest people there, the Niger River, which is huge.
Absolutely crucial.
The medieval kingdoms, colonialism, World War II's impact, independence, and then all the modern challenges.
Yeah.
Social, economic, environmental.
International relations, too.
Right.
Which raises a big question, doesn't it? How does a country with this incredibly rich past these powerful empires, we'll talk about how does it navigate modern governance, modern development, often under, frankly, immense pressure?
Let's dive into that. Where do we start? The very beginning.
Makes sense.
Okay, so the sources tell us the earliest human culture in what's now Niger pops up around 6000 BC, way up north.
Yeah, leaving behind things like rock art, megaliths.
Yeah.
Some possibly with astronomical links. Pretty amazing stuff.
Then, fast forward a bit, trade routes develop.
Right. Caravans from the early Islamic world start passing through. By 8750, you have Arab armies pushing into the Maghreb, northwest Africa.
And Islam spreads.
It does. By 1000 AD, the Berbers are largely Muslim, and this leads to the first Islamic king we know of in the western Sudan region, at Wadai, in the 11th century.
Okay, so the stage is set for the big ones.
Yeah.
The great empires.
Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. The sources talk about them expanding like concentric ripples in a pond.
I like that image. So Ghana first.
Yep, the Kingdom of Ghana. Founded by the Soninke people, thriving from the 9th to 13th centuries.
And their capital, Kumbisala, a major trade center.
Huge. Gold, salt, ivory, even slaves passing through. The king's court was incredibly important. Sources say he sat on a gold throne. Storytellers praised ancestors.
And the king's voice was considered magic.
Powerful magic, yeah. That's the phrase used. Shows the level of reverence. Even death rituals were significant. Sacrificing attendants, horses. Being buried near the king was seen as an honor.
So what's the takeaway here? It's not just raw power. It's sophisticated culture, complex system.
Absolutely. Deeply established, but like all empires.
It falls. Ghana gives way to Mali in the early 1200s, founded by the Malinke.
Right. And Mali, if we kind of zoom out, its influence went even further than Ghana's. Over 1 million square kilometers.
Wow.
The biggest pre-colonial West African empire, really. Its peak was under Mansa Musa.
Ah, Mansa Musa, famous for the pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324.
Exactly. Though interestingly, that very pilgrimage, showcasing his wealth, might have indirectly led to its downfall. It attracted attention.
Like Tuareg invaders.
Precisely. But it also boosted cities like Timbuktu and Gao. Mali's wealth came from trade taxes, yes, but also boosting farming along the Niger River.
Which brings us back to the river.
Always the river.
So after Mali fades, Songhai rises.
Yeah, emerging from Mali's eastern side, they get really strong by the late 14th century, especially under Askia Muhammad Alaj. He conquered a lot of Mali's old territory and pushed across the Sahara.
Timbuktu remained important.
Hugely, especially for salt. And in the 15th century, it became this incredible intellectual hub. Scribes working on astronomy, math.
I read somewhere they collected thousands of manuscripts there.
The sources say maybe as many as 10,000 written works, all in Arabic script, chronicles, histories, invaluable stuff.
And underlying all of this, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, is the Niger River.
Can't overstate its importance. Third longest in Africa, drains a huge chunk of the continent.
And it flows slowly in parts, creates marshland.
Yeah, upstream it's tough terrain, so the flow slows, creating this massive inundation area in Mali, West Africa's largest. Can look like 150 kilometers wide.
Incredible. And vital for transport, obviously.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Little fishing boats, bigger pelican boats for goods. It's telling that a boat trip from Niamey to Bamako takes 2 days longer than the train.
Gives you a sense of the scale, yeah.
And the reliance on that waterway.
Okay, so we have these powerful, sophisticated empires deeply connected to the river.
Yeah.
But then comes colonialism.
Right. France starts asserting dominance in the early 20th century. Niger becomes a French possession in 1898, part of their growing empire.
How did they govern it initially? The sources seemed a bit contradictory.
Well, it's described often as minimal administration, kind of a letting live approach at first.
But strategic.
Oh, definitely. They played kingdoms off against each other, slowly carved out Niger's modern borders. Ottoman Arabic even stuck around as the trade language for a while.
But it wasn't peaceful. There was resistance.
Significant resistance, yeah. From the Tuaregs, other groups often just labeled rebels. It really shows colonialism wasn't some monolithic thing. It hit different groups in different ways.
So even if the administration was minimal at first, it still changed things deeply.
Profoundly,
Yeah.
especially economically. They kept local stock farming going, but they founded Niamey mainly for strategic reasons, needing a route to Mali and Burkina Faso.
Making it a crossroad.
Exactly, between the more established French West Africa and the northern trade routes. That had huge long-term consequences.
And then World War II happens. What was the impact in Niger?
Well, hundreds of Nigerian men were sent to fight for France, Europe, North Africa, Syria.
And they expected something in return. More rights.
That seems to be the case. There was huge disappointment afterwards. They felt they'd proven themselves as citizens, but the old indirect rule system was fading, and they weren't seeing benefits.
Leading to unrest.
Big time. By mid-1944, you had riots against local chiefs, against French settlers, not just in Niger, but across the French Empire.
So the war definitely cranked up the pressure for decolonization.
Massively. Pushed the whole colonial system toward its breaking point.
Which brings us to independence. August 3rd, 1960.
A huge moment. Pride, dignity.
But also huge problems from day one. Economic burdens, political pressures.
And enormous. And if you look at Niger's history since then, political instability is, well, it's a defining feature.
The first president, Diori, didn't last long.
No, he faced immediate challenges. His government was overthrown in a coup in 1974.
And that set a pattern.
Sadly, yes. We see multiple coups, regime changes. Seni Kunche took over after that 7-4 coup, abolished the constitution, ruled for over 13 years.
More coups later, too, in the 90s.
Yep. 1993, 1996, 1999. Even when there were high hopes for civilian rule, instability often returned. The whole political scene became very polarized.
Attacks on the press, ethnic tensions.
Yes, and political arguments often framed along ethnic lines, which is extra challenging when you have a mostly rural population and, as the sources state, over 80% illiteracy back then.
And how do the economics feed into this instability? You mentioned it's landlocked, poor.
Very poor. Less than 1% arable topsoil, water issues with that irregular hydrological cycle. Agriculture is incredibly tough.
And most people rely on it.
Yeah, 85% work informally, mostly subsistence farming. There's uranium, yes, and hopes for oil, but the economy is just fundamentally vulnerable.
Okay, but there's been a recent shift in mining policy.
A major shift, according to the sources. Banning uranium exports, renegotiating gold contracts quite aggressively.
And gold is now the big earner.
It seems so, generating over $90 million quarterly, dwarfing uranium. It's an immediate cash boost for the government.
But causing friction with mining companies.
Significant friction, yes. Big challenges there.
On top of the economic woes, what about social issues? Education, health.
Still huge challenges. 8 out of 10 adults illiterate. Access to decent education, healthcare, it's a real struggle. Public spending is low.
And kids out of school.
A shocking number.
Yeah.
In 2019, over 2/3 of children aged 0-18 weren't in school. And the system itself has issues, like relying on French textbooks when teachers often speak local languages like Zarma or Hausa.
That disconnect must be huge.
It is. And then there's the environment. Niger's right in the Sahel.
Desertification.
A massive ongoing problem for decades. Losing, an estimated 1.4 million hectares of arable land every single year.
Wow. I read even parts of the capital, Niamey, are threatened by the desert encroaching.
Satellite photos apparently show it. It's stark.
And climate change makes it worse.
Expected to intensify everything, more droughts, more floods, rainfall projections look grim. Niger's ranked, I think, one of the 2 most vulnerable countries globally to climate change.
Is it climate change or human activity causing the desertification? or both?
Well, that's a big debate in the scientific community, actually. Is it mainly human land degradation, or is it larger climate shifts, changes in social activity? Probably a complex mix.
Okay, so massive domestic challenges. But Niger is still active internationally.
Oh, yes. Far from passive. It's a founding member of regional groups like the Union of the Sahel and Sahara States, ECOWAS.
Its position in West Africa dictates a lot of its foreign policy.
Absolutely. It cooperates with the U.S. on counterterrorism, for instance. But it also sees China as a really important development partner.
Mining, infrastructure.
Telecoms, yeah.
And there's this interesting shift in alliances mentioned in the sources, moving away from traditional partners.
There's definitely talk of growing disenchantment, particularly with France, the former colonial power.
So looking elsewhere.
Actively seeking help from the global South China, as we said, but also, more recently, Russia. It seems Niger is positioning itself to support a more multipolar world order.
Fascinating dynamic.
It really is.
So, bringing it all together, Niger today, looking ahead, the picture seems heavy. Autocratic rule, unrest, debt, population growth.
It's a tough outlook, no doubt. The sources paint a picture of a country under immense strain.
Have there been efforts towards reform, good governance?
There have been commitments, yes. Focus on education, health. President Tanja set up a national dialogue on good governance. But the underlying fragility remains.
And some sources even predict more instability, coups.
They do. Some suggest another open government seizure or a coup is quite likely in the coming years, given everything the mining renegotiations, the foreign policy shifts.
Yeah.
It's a volatile mix.
Wow. This has been quite the deep dive from that ancient rock art all the way to these really complex modern shifts.
It's an incredible sweep of history.
A story of resilience, yes, but also just immense ongoing challenges and constant adaptation.
Absolutely. And if you step back and look at that huge sweep, the great empires, the environmental pressures, the political turbulence, it really shows you something powerful, I think. That even when facing unbelievable challenges, that core cultural identity, that drive for self-determination, it just persists, it endures.
So for someone listening, what's the key takeaway? Why does understanding Niger's story matter?
Well, I think seeing how this incredibly deep history shapes today's struggles and aspirations gives you a really valuable lens, not just for West Africa, but for understanding development, governance, these big global issues everywhere.
It connects the past to the present in a very real way.
Exactly. Which leads to maybe a final thought to leave people with.
Go for it.
Okay, so given Niger's incredible history, as this cradle of empires, and its current intense struggle for stability and development, how might the lessons from its own past, particularly the resilience, the adaptability of its diverse peoples, how might that actually shape its path forward in this really complex, changing, multipolar world we're in now? Something to think about.